The day the door opened, nobody at Thornwood Wildlife Sanctuary was prepared for what happened next. When Dr. Sarah Kumalo made the decision that Thursday afternoon, every member of her staff felt their hearts stop. Hands froze mid-task. Someone whispered, "Sarah, no, don't." But nobody could change her mind. Because waiting on the other side of that whelping room door was a full-grown white lion the conservation community had warned her about for 2 years. A nearly 200-pound apex predator whose DNA was hardwired to hunt, to kill, to dominate. They'd called her reckless. They'd said she was playing with fire. For 24 months, she'd defied nature itself, raising a lion cub alongside 2 Rottweilers. The scientific journals said it was impossible. The behavioral experts predicted catastrophe. And inside that room were 4 newborn Rottweiler puppies. Blind, helpless, weighing barely 2 pounds each. The perfect size to trigger a predator's hunting instinct. "Sarah, we have the tranquilizer ready. Just say the word." The voices around her were tense, pleading. But Dr. Kumalo took a breath and turned the handle. Because everything, 2 years of trust, countless sleepless nights, the bond between species that shouldn't exist, came down to this single moment. The white lion stepped forward. His amber eyes locked on the puppies. Every person in that hallway held their breath. Then, in the space of 10 impossible seconds, the massive predator did something that would defy every law of nature and make international headlines. Stay with me, because what this white lion did next, and what happened in the weeks that followed, will absolutely stun you. Before we dive in, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comment section. The first sound was barely a whisper, a mewling so faint that Dr. Sarah Kumalo almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. But she pressed her ear closer to the termite mound anyway, and there it was again, the desperate cry of something clinging to life by a thread thinner than spider silk. When she finally reached into the hollow, her fingers found ribs like piano keys beneath for stretched translucent over bone. The heartbeat was a moth's wing flutter. The white lion cub's blue-tinted eyes were crusted shut, his gray tongue lolling from dehydration. 4 weeks old. Maybe 3 kilograms, the weight of a house cat. Already sentenced to death. Sarah knew why. White lions weren't nature's gift. They were nature's mistake. A recessive gene that painted targets on cubs' backs, making them visible to every predator, obvious to every prey animal. In the brutal mathematics of survival, a white cub was a liability the pride couldn't afford. His mother had made the calculation every lioness makes. Cut your losses. Save the strong. Let the weak return to dust. But as Sarah cradled the trembling creature against her chest, her veterinary training went to war with something deeper. 23 years in wildlife conservation had taught her the sacred rule: never interfere. Nature isn't cruel, it's efficient. Intervention creates dependency. You save one, you doom the species. Yet her fingers were already checking his gums, assessing capillary refill, making decisions that would cost her professionally. The drive back to Thornwood Sanctuary became a 47-minute race against shutdown. Twice, the cub's breathing stopped entirely. Twice, Sarah had to pull over and administer emergency compressions, breathing into his tiny nostrils while her hands shook. She rigged in 4-line in the truck bed, pumping subcutaneous fluids under his papery skin, wrapping him in her jacket against shock. Every pothole felt like a betrayal. Every kilometer stretched into eternity. When they finally crashed through the sanctuary gates, Sarah's assistant took one look at the dying cub and said what they were both thinking. He won't make it through the night. Sarah set up the veterinary clinic like a war room. Incubator at 32 degrees. Oxygen flow at 2 liters per minute. Glucose drip. Antibiotics for the respiratory infection she could hear rattling in his chest. She tube-fed him formula every 90 minutes. Her alarm clock becoming a metronome of desperation. Between feedings, she lay on the floor beside the incubator, one hand resting against the glass, monitoring the shallow rise and fall of his ribcage. At 3 a.m., his breathing changed, became labored, irregular. Sarah's hand moved to the emergency kit. At 4:30, he stopped responding to stimulation. She genuinely believed she was watching him die. But at dawn, when the first light crept through the clinic windows and touched his white fur, something impossible happened. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. Those blue-tinted eyes, cloudy with illness but unmistakably alive, locked onto Sarah's face with an intensity that stopped her heart. In that moment, imprinting occurred. The dangerous, irreversible recognition. You are my mother. You are my world. You are everything. Sarah whispered his name for the first time, Aslan, the lion who was never meant to survive, and understood she'd just broken every rule she'd ever sworn to uphold. The question wasn't whether she could save him anymore. The question was what happened when this 3-kilogram ghost grew into 200 kilograms of apex predator who believed a human was his pride. 3 days after Aslan's eyes opened, Sarah made a decision that terrified her more than pulling him from that termite mound. The cub had stabilized, gained 400 grams, kept down formula, his breathing no longer rattled with infection. But he couldn't live in an incubator forever. What he needed now wasn't medicine. It was family. And waiting in the compound were Titan and Zara, 75 pounds of Rottweiler muscle each, who would either accept this strange creature or kill him in seconds. Sarah chose neutral territory. The outdoor enclosure, morning light, no food present to trigger resource guarding. She carried Aslan in a transport crate, his white fur now clean and fluffed, his blue eyes alert but confused. Through the mesh, she could see the dogs already knew something was wrong. Their bodies had gone rigid, hackles raised along their spines, nostrils flaring as they caught the scent drifting from the crate. Feline. Predator. Not pack. Titan reached the crate first, his massive head lowering to investigate, lips pulling back to expose teeth designed to crush bone. The growl that rumbled from his chest was a warning that needed no translation. Explain this, or I will end it. Zara circled more cautiously, her movements calculated, assessing. Sarah held her breath, hand on the crate latch, knowing the next 60 seconds would determine if Aslan lived or died. Then Zara did something extraordinary. She pressed her nose against the crate bars and released a sound Sarah had never heard from her. A low, questioning whine that softened into something almost maternal. The Rottweiler's massive tongue slipped through the bars and licked across Aslan's face, tasting his scent, reading the story written in his pheromones. Helpless, infant, no threat. The cub's instinctive response sealed everything. He mewled, the exact pitch of a distressed puppy, and Zara's entire body language shifted from wary to protective. But Titan wasn't convinced. When Sarah opened the crate and Aslan stumbled out on unsteady legs, the male Rottweiler moved with deliberate dominance. He placed one massive paw on the cub's back and growled, not aggressive but absolute. The message was unmistakable. I am Alpha. You are nothing. Submit or face consequences. Aslan, operating on pure instinct, did the only thing that could save him. He dropped his tiny belly to the ground, exposed his throat, and went completely still. That gesture, the universal language of surrender, changed everything. Titan held the position for 5 eternal seconds, then removed his paw and stepped back. Permission granted. The cub could stay. The real test came at feeding time. Sarah sat in the enclosure with Aslan cradled in her lap, bottle feeding him while the dogs watched from 10 feet away. Every time Aslan latched onto the nipple and made his suckling sounds, Zara's ears would prick forward, her tail giving small, uncertain wags. When he finished and Sarah burped him, his tiny body draped over her shoulder, Zara finally approached. She lay down beside them, her warm bulk pressing against Sarah's leg, and the cub immediately crawled toward her heat. That night, Sarah watched through the monitoring camera as the 3 of them arranged themselves for sleep. Zara curled into a protective C-shape, Titan behind her as the outer guard, and Aslan, tiny, white, impossible, nestled between them in a tangle of black fur and tan markings. Sarah sat in her office until 3 a.m., watching that screen, waiting for disaster. But disaster never came. Just three creatures breathing in synchronized rhythm, proving that family wasn't about species. It was about choice. The education began the morning Aslan tried to steal Titan's breakfast. The cub was 5 weeks old now, stronger, bolder, his survival instincts sharpening into something that could become dangerous if left unchecked. Sarah had just set down the feeding bowls, kibble mixed with raw meat for the dogs, formula-soaked softened food for Aslan, when the white cub made his mistake. He wobbled toward Titan's bowl on unsteady legs, drawn by the scent of fresh meat, completely unaware he was about to cross a line written in the ancient language of pack hierarchy. Titan's response was instant and terrifying. His lips peeled back, exposing canines that could puncture steel. The growl that erupted from his chest wasn't the playful rumble Aslan had heard before. This was pure, focused aggression. The message was unmistakable. Approach this bowl and I will hurt you. Aslan froze mid-step, every muscle in his tiny body locking. Then, operating on instinct deeper than thought, he dropped his belly to the ground and crawled backward, never breaking eye contact, until Titan's growl softened and stopped. First lesson learned. You eat last. Always. But Titan's curriculum extended far beyond food. Every interaction became a teaching moment, delivered with the precision of a professor who understood that failure meant death. When Aslan played too roughly, batting at Titan's face with needle claws extended, the Rottweiler's response was immediate. A firm paw on the cub's head, pressing him down until his chin touched earth. The pressure wasn't painful, but it was absolute. It said, I am stronger. I will always be stronger. Remember this. Zara's teaching style was different but equally uncompromising. She encouraged play, engaging with Aslan's pouncing attacks, letting him gnaw on her legs and pull her ears. But the moment his claws came out, those tiny hooks that would one day become lethal weapons, her correction was surgical. A quick nip to his scruff, not breaking skin but sharp enough to sting, followed by her turning away completely. The withdrawal of attention was devastating. Aslan would whimper, crawl on his belly to her side, and she wouldn't acknowledge him for a full minute. The lesson was clear. Claws mean playtime ends. Control yourself or lose what you love. Sarah watched these exchanges with her heart oscillating between wonder and terror. She documented everything in her research journal. The way Aslan learned to read Titan's ear positions, predicting corrections before they came. The way he'd expose his belly preemptively when approaching either dog, offering submission before it was demanded. The way his play bows became exaggerated, his body language screaming, I'm not a threat, please don't hurt me, I just want to belong. By 6 weeks old, Aslan had gained 2 kilograms and learned a vocabulary he'd never need in the wild. The exposed belly meant, you win, I surrender. The lowered head with averted gaze meant, I recognize your dominance. The slow approach with tail tucked meant, I'm asking permission to exist in your space. He'd absorbed the complex grammar of canine social structure, fluent in a language his DNA never intended him to speak. During morning feedings, the hierarchy played out like ritualized theater. Titan ate first, standing over his bowl with territorial authority. Zara ate second, glancing occasionally at Titan for confirmation. And Aslan waited 10 feet away, belly pressed to ground, until both dogs finished and walked away. Only then would he approach his own food, eating quickly, nervously, always watching for signs of disapproval. Sarah understood what she was witnessing. A lion learning to be Omega, the lowest rank, the most submissive member of a pack that shouldn't exist. His survival depended entirely on maintaining that position, on never forgetting that he lived at the mercy of 2 dogs who could kill him with a single bite. The question that kept her awake at night, what happens when he's too big to correct? At 3 months, Aslan weighed 15 kilograms. Still light enough that Sarah could scoop him up when he tangled himself in the garden hose, still small enough that his pounces felt like enthusiastic greetings rather than assaults. By 6 months, the scale registered 40 kilograms, and his play had acquired weight, momentum, consequences. The dogs began calculating their responses differently, reading something in his movements that Sarah was only beginning to understand. At 1 year, 80 kilograms of white lion occupied her compound, and every interaction required mathematics she'd never had to perform before. Each growth spurt rewrote the rules they'd been living by. The swipe of a paw that once made her laugh now left bruises blooming across her thighs, purple and tender. His mouth during play, those jaws designed to crush vertebrae and suffocate prey, closed around her forearm with what he thought was gentleness, and she'd count to 3, breathing through the pressure before he'd release her. His canines had thickened from kitten needles into ivory stakes. When he yawned, she could see the architecture of death. The incident happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that tricks you into thinking everything will always be fine. Aslan and Zara were playing in the yard, the game they'd played 100 times before. Chase and tumble, the eternal dance between dogs and their strange white brother. But Aslan's coordination hadn't caught up to his size yet. He lunged, mistimed the distance, and one massive paw caught Zara's shoulder with claws unsheathed. The sound Zara made stopped Sarah's heart. Not the play growl she'd heard 1,000 times, but a yelp of real pain, sharp and frightened. Blood welled immediately through gray fur, 3 parallel gashes from collarbone to shoulder blade, and Zara stumbled sideways, confused that her brother had hurt her. Titan's response was thunder made flesh. Sarah had never seen him move like that. 90 kilograms of muscle and controlled fury crossing the yard in 3 strides, hitting Aslan broadside with the full weight of his body. Before Aslan could react, before Sarah could even shout a warning, Titan had him by the throat, jaws locked around that vulnerable column of muscle and windpipe, driving the white lion down into the dust. Sarah's training screamed at her to intervene. Her hands actually lifted, her body moving toward them before her survival instinct overrode everything else. This wasn't her fight. This was older than her, older than language, the brutal mathematics of pack hierarchy being recalculated in real time. If she stepped between them now, she'd either escalate the violence or get caught in it. Titan held him there. 1 second. 5. 10. A full minute while Aslan's roars dissolved into whimpers, while his massive body went completely still, while submission flowed through him like electricity finding ground. When Titan finally released him and stepped back, Aslan stayed down, pressed flat against the earth, trembling. His ears pinned back. His tail tucked. His blue eyes, usually so bold and curious, couldn't meet anyone's gaze. For the rest of that day and into the evening, Aslan moved like a ghost through the compound, hugging walls, avoiding contact, his confidence shattered into something unrecognizable. The pack hierarchy had reasserted itself with teeth and pressure and the oldest law in the world. But that night, Sarah stood in the doorway watching Aslan sleep, and all she could see were his shoulders, those bands of muscle that hadn't existed 6 months ago, the power coiled in his haunches, the size of his paws still growing. Titan had won today through dominance and experience and speed, through being smarter and more ruthless. How many more times could he win? How long before those advantages evaporated? How long before Aslan's body made him uncorrectable, and the next accident wasn't an accident at all? The first roar came on a Tuesday night when the moon hung full and heavy over the Limpopo plains. Aslan was 18 months old now, 120 kilograms of white muscle and restless energy. He'd been pacing the compound for an hour, his movements different, agitated, purposeful, his head lifting repeatedly toward the eastern fence where the Timbavati Wildlife Reserve sprawled for thousands of acres. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in her hands, sensing something fundamental was about to shift. Then she heard them, the wild lions. Their territorial roars rolled across the distance like thunder, ancient and absolute, claiming the night as their own. Sarah had heard those sounds 1,000 times. They'd never affected Aslan before. But tonight everything changed. The roar that erupted from Aslan's chest wasn't the playful growl she'd grown accustomed to. It was something primordial, a sound that resonated in bone marrow and made every window in her house vibrate. The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's fingers and shattered on the floor, but she barely noticed. She was too busy watching her white lion transform into something she didn't recognize. Aslan's entire body had changed. His hackles stood rigid along his spine. His tail lashed with aggressive intention. And his eyes, those blue-tinted eyes that had always looked at her with recognition and love, had gone distant, focused on something beyond the fence that called to him in a language older than language itself. Titan tried first. He approached Aslan with the command bark that had worked for 18 months, the sharp vocalization that meant, Stop, return, remember who you are. Aslan didn't even turn his head. He paced the fence line, his massive paws churning up dust, occasionally releasing another roar that made Sarah's teeth ache. Zara tried next, pressing against his side, using her body to redirect his attention. For the first time in his life, Aslan shoved her away, not violently but dismissively, the way an adult lion might push aside an irritating cub. The dogs retreated. Sarah watched them exchange a look she'd never seen before: uncertainty. For 18 months, they'd been his teachers, his pack leaders, his entire world. But tonight, something in Aslan had woken up that didn't recognize their authority. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived the next morning, summoned by Sarah's 3 a.m. phone call. He was a wildlife behaviorist who'd been tracking Aslan's development with academic fascination and growing concern. He watched the white lion through binoculars for 20 minutes before delivering his verdict. "The genetic programming is activating," Marcus said, his voice flat with scientific certainty. "You understand what that means, Sarah. He was raised by dogs, socialized by dogs. But he's not a dog. Those instincts, territorial aggression, prey drive, dominance behavior, they're not learned. They are hardwired, written into his DNA by 500,000 years of evolution." Sarah watched Aslan prowl the fence line, his movements still agitated even in daylight. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you might have built a time bomb. All it takes is one trigger, a scent, a sound, a biochemical cascade in his brain, and 18 months of training becomes irrelevant. He's 120 kilograms now. In 6 months, he'll be 160. In a year, he'll outweigh both dogs combined." Marcus turned to look at her directly. "The question isn't if his predatory instincts will fully emerge. It's when. And whether anyone survives when they do." That night, Sarah sat on her porch and watched the impossible family she'd created. Titan and Zara lay 20 feet from Aslan instead of their usual tangle. They kept glancing at him, then away as if seeing something for the first time. Something that had always been there, hidden beneath learned behaviors and pack loyalty. A predator. Beautiful. Deadly. And waking up. The delivery truck arrived at 11 a.m. on a Thursday, and with it came the moment Sarah had been dreading for 2 years. Aslan was sprawled in the shade of the acacia tree, his white coat brilliant against the red earth, 160 kilograms of languid muscle and seeming contentment. At 2 years old, he'd settled back into pack routine after the roaring incident 6 months earlier. Sarah had almost convinced herself the crisis had passed, that love and training had won, that the dangerous moment Marcus Webb predicted would never come. Then the truck driver opened the cargo bed. The scent hit like a shockwave. Fresh-killed antelope, quartered carcasses, still warm, blood pooling in the transport bed. Sarah saw Aslan's head snap up instantly, his nostrils flaring wide, his pupils dilated to black pools that swallowed the blue entirely. And his body, his entire body, dropped into a posture she had never seen before. The stalking crouch was pure predator. Low, fluid, absolutely focused. His shoulder blades rolled with each step, his massive paws placing themselves in perfect silence. His tail went rigid, parallel to the ground, every muscle coiled with lethal intention. And he was moving directly toward Zara. The Rottweiler was 15 feet away, lying in her usual spot near the water trough, completely unaware. Sarah's voice died in her throat. Her hand moved toward the tranquilizer pistol on her belt, but her fingers felt like they were moving through concrete. Time stretched and warped. 3 seconds became 3 hours. Aslan's lips pulled back, exposing 4-inch canines. His eyes locked on Zara's hindquarters, the vulnerable flesh, the kill zone. He gathered his haunches beneath him, preparing to spring. In that eternal moment, Sarah saw the truth with devastating clarity. Aslan wasn't seeing Zara, his pack mother, the dog who'd raised him from a dying kitten. He was seeing meat. Prey. Instinct. Then Titan's bark shattered the moment like a gunshot. Sharp. Authoritative. Absolute. Not aggressive, commanding. The single vocalization cut through whatever neurochemical cascade was flooding Aslan's brain. The white lion's head jerked sideways. He blinked. The stalking posture broke as if someone had cut puppet strings. His pupils contracted back to normal, and when his eyes refocused on Zara, confusion flooded his expression. What happened next broke Sarah's heart. Aslan looked down at his own body, at the predatory crouch, at his exposed teeth, at the distance he'd closed between himself and Zara, and something like horror crossed his face. He immediately dropped into submission. Belly exposed, throat vulnerable, a whimpering sound that was pure distress. He crawled on his belly toward Titan, not Zara, seeking punishment and forgiveness from the alpha who'd just saved his pack mother's life. The incident lasted less than 10 seconds. But it shattered everything. Sarah convened an emergency staff meeting that afternoon. 7 people sat around the conference table, and for the first time in 2 years, relocation was seriously discussed. Jessica, the head veterinary assistant, was blunt. He almost killed Zara. If Titan hadn't intervened, we'd be burying her right now. We cannot keep a predator this size in a domestic environment. It's not safe. It's not ethical. Separation would destroy him, Sarah countered, but her voice lacked conviction. The pack bond is the only thing keeping him stable. Is it? Marcus Webb had joined via video call. His image on the laptop screen was unforgiving. Or is it a leash that's fraying? Sarah, what you witnessed today wasn't an anomaly. It was a preview. His brain is maturing. Testosterone is surging. The predatory instincts are fully online now. The question isn't if it happens again. It's when. And whether Titan will be there to stop it. They took a vote. 4 for relocation. 3 for keeping him. Sarah abstained. The decision was deferred for 2 weeks, pending behavioral observation. But everyone left that room understanding the same unbearable truth. Love might not be enough. Biology might win. And the next time Aslan's instincts hijacked his brain, someone might not survive. The ultrasound confirmed what Sarah already suspected. Zara was pregnant with 4 puppies, due in approximately 8 weeks. The sanctuary exploded into crisis mode before Sarah even left the veterinary clinic. Jessica found her in the hallway, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. We need to separate Aslan. Today. Right now. Before this gets any further. Within an hour, the entire staff had assembled in the conference room, not for discussion, but for battle. The division was absolute and vicious. Half the team demanded immediate relocation of Aslan to the Timbavati Big Cat facility 30 kilometers away. Their argument was sound, backed by every piece of literature on predator behavior. Newborn puppies were small, helpless, and emitted high-frequency vocalizations specifically designed to trigger prey drive in carnivores. It wasn't a risk. It was biological certainty. You're asking us to trust a lion around squeaking 2-pound targets, Marcus Webb stated via video call, his frustration palpable. Sarah, every instinct in his brain will scream. Prey. This isn't about love or training. This is about neurochemistry and evolution. But Sarah refused. Her hands were shaking as she stood at the head of the table, but her voice was steel. Separation would destroy the only anchor he has. The pack bond is what's kept him stable through every crisis. You remove that, and we're creating the very danger you're trying to prevent. Or, Jessica shot back, we're preventing 4 puppies from being slaughtered. The room went silent. Sarah looked at each face, seeing the fear, the doubt, the barely concealed certainty that she was making a catastrophic mistake. I'm not separating him, she said finally. But we implement protocols. Starting now. The protocols were military grade. Aslan would be monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the moment Zara's pregnancy was confirmed until the puppies were weaned. Cameras were installed in every corner of the compound. 12 angles, recording continuously, monitored in shifts by staff members who'd been trained to recognize pre-attack behavior. A tranquilizer rifle was mounted in a quick-release case on the compound wall, loaded and ready. Sarah's assistant moved into the sanctuary's guest cottage, sleeping 30 meters from the enclosure. Emergency protocols were rehearsed daily. But as the weeks progressed and Zara's belly swelled, something unexpected happened. Aslan became obsessively protective. He positioned himself beside her constantly, his massive white body a living fortress between Zara and the rest of the world. When delivery drivers approached the compound gates, his low growl was a warning that raised the hair on everyone's necks. When Marcus Webb arrived for a behavioral assessment, Aslan planted himself in front of Zara and wouldn't budge, forcing Marcus to conduct his observations from 30 meters away. "It's encouraging," Sarah told her staff during the weekly briefing. "Protective behavior, not predatory." But privately, in the dark hours before dawn when she couldn't sleep, Sarah knew the truth. The real test wasn't during pregnancy. Pregnant Zara was still Zara, still his pack mother, still recognizably the dog who'd raised him. The real test came after birth. When 4 tiny creatures emerged, blind, helpless, moving with jerky, uncoordinated motions, emitting those high-pitched squeaks that nature specifically designed to trigger nurturing in canines and hunting in predators. Sarah had read the literature 100 times. She knew what the science said. Newborn puppies were the perfect size and sound profile to activate prey drive. Lions in the wild killed smaller carnivores young instinctively, eliminating future competition. The fact that Aslan had been raised by dogs might mean nothing when those ancient circuits in his brain fired. One question haunted her through every sleepless night. Had 2 years of pack bonding rewired his instincts deeply enough? Or would biology win when it mattered most? In 6 weeks, they'd have their answer. And if Sarah was wrong, 4 innocent lives would pay the price. Zara went into labor at 6:17 on a Thursday evening, the same day of the week, almost to the hour, that Sarah had first brought Aslan home as a dying cub. The symmetry felt like destiny or prophecy, and Sarah couldn't decide which terrified her more. The whelping room door closed with Titan inside, Aslan outside. There had been no discussion, no debate. This was the line that couldn't be crossed. Not yet. Not until they knew what lived behind those blue-tinted eyes when newborn puppies entered the world. Aslan stood at the door like a monument carved from white marble and lethal intent. 180 kilograms of muscle and uncertainty, positioned so completely that no human could pass without physically moving him, and no one was brave enough to try. His head pressed against the wood, ears swiveling to track every sound from within. The rumbling that emanated from his chest was something Sarah had never heard before. Part growl, part purr, a continuous vibration that made the doorframe hum and set everyone's teeth on edge. Inside the whelping room, Zara's labor progressed with textbook efficiency. Jessica monitored from inside, her voice coming through the radio in measured updates. First puppy crowning. She's doing great. Titan's keeping his distance, letting her work. The first sharp cry pierced the door, the newborn's initial protest at being thrust into the cold world. Aslan's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. His entire body went rigid. His pupils dilated to black voids. His claws extended involuntarily, gouging deep parallel lines into the wooden floor before he even realized what he'd done. For 3 seconds, Sarah watched something ancient and predatory flicker across his face. Then he forced himself to breathe, forced his claws to retract, forced his muscles to unlock. Sarah sat down beside him in the hallway, her back against the wall, her hand finding the familiar warm bulk of his shoulder. "I know," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was acknowledging. "I know it's hard." The second puppy arrived 19 minutes later. Same sharp cry. Same full-body tension from Aslan. Same visible battle between instinct and learned behavior. Sarah felt it under her hand, every muscle coiling, every reflex screaming at him to do something his brain couldn't quite articulate. Hunt. Chase. Kill. The ancient programming trying to override 2 years of love. By the third puppy, Aslan was trembling. Not from cold or fear, but from the sheer effort of restraint. Sweat darkened the white fur around his neck. His breathing had gone ragged. Sarah kept her hand on his shoulder, a touchstone, a reminder. You are not alone. You are pack. You are loved. The fourth and final puppy arrived at 9:43, 3 hours and 26 minutes after labor began. Its cry was stronger than the others, indignant and healthy. Inside the room, Zara's exhausted cleaning noises began. The wet sounds of a mother tending to brand new life, the soft encouraging whimpers she made to stimulate breathing and warmth. Then silence. the kind of silence that presses against eardrums and makes hearts pound. Aslan turned his massive head and looked directly at Sarah. Those blue-tinted eyes held something she couldn't read. Question, plea, terror, determination, all mixed together in an expression too complex for any single word. Then he lowered his head and placed it carefully in her lap. The weight was enormous, pressing her legs flat against the floor. He closed his eyes. Sarah sat in that hallway, hand on a lion's head, and understood that everything. 2 years of love, countless hours of training, the impossible bond between species, had led to this moment. In 24 hours, that door would open. Aslan would meet the puppies face to face, and everyone would learn whether pack loyalty could override 500,000 years of evolution. The question hung unspoken between them, heavy as stone. When that door opens, what happens next? 24 hours after the last puppy was born, Sarah stood at the whelping room door with her hand on the handle and her heart in her throat. Every staff member was present. Jessica held the tranquilizer rifle, safety off, finger resting beside the trigger. Marcus Webb had driven from Johannesburg to witness what he'd called either a miracle or a tragedy. Cameras recorded from 6 angles. The emergency protocol was active. Everyone understood. This was the moment that would validate 2 years of faith or condemn it as fatal hubris. Sarah opened the door. Aslan rose from where he'd been lying for 24 hours straight. Every muscle in his 195-kilogram body coiled with purpose and tension. He took 1 step forward, then stopped. Because Titan stood in the doorway, a 75-kilogram wall of protective fury. Ears forward, body squared. The message was unmistakable. Respect the boundary or face me. For 3 seconds that lasted forever, the 2 animals locked eyes. Then Aslan did something that made Sarah's vision blur with tears. He dropped his massive head in submission. He approached slowly, his body lowered, every gesture screaming deference and respect. He stopped at Titan's feet and waited, asking permission. Titan held his ground for 10 eternal heartbeats, then stepped aside. Permission granted. Aslan entered the room where Zara lay with 4 tiny blind puppies squirming against her belly. Each one barely 2 pounds, squeaking with high-pitched voices that should trigger every predatory instinct in his DNA. The room held its collective breath. Jessica's finger moved to the trigger. The white lion lowered his massive head and sniffed the first puppy. Gentle as a whisper. Breathing in the scent, imprinting the smell as family. He moved to the second, then the third, then the fourth. Each inspection careful, deliberate, impossibly tender. Then he walked 3 feet away and lay down. Close enough to protect. Far enough to respect Zara's maternal space. He didn't move for 6 hours. Over the following weeks, something unfolded that would make headlines across the world and rewrite what animal behaviorists believed possible. The puppies grew bold, using Aslan as a living playground. They bit his ears with needle teeth. They pulled his mane. They crawled across his face and fell asleep in the curve of his massive paws. And through it all, the 195-kilogram apex predator remained motionless, a breathing pillow with infinite patience, every muscle held in check by something stronger than instinct. When the puppies were old enough to venture outside, the impossible family began their evening patrols. Titan led, his proud gait marking territory and maintaining order. Zara walked beside him, occasionally glancing back. Aslan moved in the center, his white coat brilliant in the sunset, with 4 Rottweiler puppies tumbling in his wake, climbing on him, darting under his legs, using his tail as a rope toy. Visitors to Thornwood Sanctuary would stop and stare, cameras clicking, unable to process the sight of 2 Rottweilers and a lion moving in synchronized formation like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah watched from the sanctuary porch one evening as the sun painted the Limpopo plains in shades of amber and gold. Aslan lay in the grass, surrounded by dogs, a puppy asleep between his front paws while another used his head as a pillow. She thought about the dying cub she'd pulled from that termite mound, weighing less than a house cat, sentenced to death by his own biology. She thought about the impossible choice she'd made, the rules she'd broken, the colleagues who'd called her reckless and worse. Every textbook said this couldn't work. Biology said it was doomed. The scientific journals published papers questioning their own assumptions about instinct and learning. But the 7 creatures patrolling her sanctuary prove something more powerful than DNA or evolutionary programming. Family is not inherited. It's not written in genes or determined by species. Family is chosen. It's taught. It's practiced every single day, in every moment of restraint, every gesture of gentleness, every conscious decision to be protector instead of predator. The white lion who should have killed the dogs instead became their brother. The dogs who should have feared him instead became his salvation. And somewhere in that termite mound in the Limpopo dust, nature learned what humans have always known. Its rules, like all rules, are made to be broken by those brave enough to believe in something impossible.